It's time once again to honor the doyens of drag racing. The 23rd annual induction ceremony for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame is about to begin at the Paramount Plaza in Gainesville, Florida.
You know, trying to fast forward this thing as much as possible because I know Forrest is just chomping at the bit to get up here.
You had your 5 minutes. I get 30.
Here's Big Denny Don Garlits with our first inductee, Bernie Federle.
Bernie Federle. He's a Canadian. He started his drag racing career in dragsters up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Bernie Federle and I went to high school together. For a lot of years, we went to high school together.
Him and Terry Capps were really good friends, and it was a formidable team. They raced for many years.
We had this incredible 32 Ford. Top of every gear, that thing just lay down. So we're heading to a drag race, and Bernie's not saying a heck of a lot, and he says, pull over to the side of the road there for a minute. We unhook the tow bar, and he says, warm that thing up. So I get in it, and I start it up, and he lays over the right front fender, just like a trophy moose. He grabs the rad supports and a screwdriver, and he said, hit it. And he's cranking away with this screwdriver, and he's going, yeah, we're getting there. And by this time, you know, it's up to 7,500. I'm pulling fourth gear. It's up to 8,500. Hell, we're going 120 miles an hour down this highway, passing cars on the right and the left and everything else. He leans over and he says, Cap, I think we got it. Right then, I knew this guy was a winner.
John Force noticed him and hired him on just as a working on the car.
He was on the start line with me when I won Montreal. He was just over in the other lane with Ed McCullough. Right? And that's when I said, oh, I'm going to hire this guy. Coyle goes, he'll never work for you. I said, yes, he will.
It was pretty much a one-way conversation. I didn't get much chance to say no.
In those days, Austin Coyle was the crew chief, and they had to have a lot of guys because Forrest tore up a lot of parts.
Soon I found out I was a pretty good fit with him because Forrest didn't mind a little fire as long as he could win.
But pretty soon, Terry became the co-crew chief with Austin Coyle. Forrest was one of the few people that started that. One guy can work on the engine, the other guy can work on the clutch and different things that are done, and there's not quite so much pressure on just one guy.
Quick Coyle, get your mind right quote. That keep me humble. He said, Bernie, the reason we're such a good team is I know all the important stuff and you know all the rest.
For years, they worked on Forrest's car, Federle and Coyle, and they won 15 championships. I mean, that's no small feat. So he's going into the Hall of Fame tonight, one of the more famous crew chiefs, one of the more famous drivers. In fact, we have a John Force mannequin right here. This can't be one of his fire suits, though. It must be a fake. It's a little bit too clean.
This looks like a conspiracy here. I thought Bernie was my friend all these years, but no, I can't even set with you. It's all the Canadians. I thought I had all the wins.
He has more.
He's got 144.
Yeah, look, I wrote that.
Did you write that down?
No, I didn't write that down, but I wrote how many rounds? 1,157 rounds. You can't read this. This is in Canadian.
He's good, Bernie. The team of Federle, John Medlin, Austin Coyle made me what I am today.
That's right.
Right?
Correct.
My wife says a dribbling idiot. Right? Oh, well, she does. But Bernie, I was nobody, and you came into this family, and you really organized us. And that was the key to our success. And all the trophies, everything, what I really bless you for is you saved my family when it had trouble. When my wife and I had issues, you set me down, and you said, Force, never tell the truth. I said, Bernie, you always told the truth. And you said, yeah, but you ain't good at it. Hey, listen, Bernie Federle, all the wins, they all know what you've done. You made me who I am today, and I love you with all my heart. And I'm going to shut up, so would you do it right and fix what I've screwed up? Would you handle it?
I'll handle it. Bernie, get your butt up here. Let's make that presentation.
Thanks, John. Man, that was quite a spiel. Gee. If I'd known I was that good, I'd ask for more money.
Coverage of the 23rd Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame 2013 Induction Ceremony is being brought to you by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology. Low-Car, quality plain and simple. And by VR12, ultimate cooling system protection.
Our next inductee is Harry Hibbler.
Late Tony Nancy and I were having lunch, and Tony looked up at me and he says, "Ed, what does Harry do?" And I thought for a minute. I looked at Tony and I said, "I don't have a clue."
Harry Hibbler. They called him Hand Grenade Harry. He drove cars just like this. Blew a lot of them up, and that's why they called him Hand Grenade.
I drove for guys that were way ahead of their time because they actually built their engines for the new rules of 1,000 foot. I was still driving 1,320. So you got to understand that 320 foot really was tough on motors.
But that's not why Harry's going into the Hall of Fame. For 23 years now, he has written every bio in the Hall of Fame brochures and on the website and in the program.
I mean, he is really the Renaissance man. He came to California as a young guy, probably around 16 years old, interested in drag racing. Then he went to work for Robert Peterson at Peterson Publishing. And they saw the things that Harry could do and how dedicated he was to the sport of drag racing. Then he moved on to Hot Rod magazine. From there, he was a publisher of Hot Rod, and he did such a bang-up job that they moved him up to corporate level at one of Bob Peterson's trusted employees. Then it became a time when Hot Rod magazine, the circulation wasn't doing good. So Harry came up with the idea, put together a deal where they did a evaluation of Don Garlits' Swamp Rat dragster against an F-18 being catapulted off an aircraft carrier.
The Hall of Fame really appreciates the work that he has done for us, supplying us with those bios. And so tonight, Harry Hibbler goes into the Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
I've been helping select a lot of the people here, and believe me, when I saw my name on the inductee list, I didn't know anything about it, and it was probably one of the biggest surprises of my life. And I thank all of my fellow selectors for that. I'm really blown away by that. And all of the congratulations to everybody here, and thank you very much, and let's have a great life.
Our next inductee is Harada, Hobbs, and Vodnik.
Now there's a name out of the past. The 60s, they were a formidable gas team.
Kenny and I got together when he called me and told me that he needed a driver. This was in 1960.
But the race that really made them famous was when they won the U.S. Nationals in 1963 and beat Big Daddy Don Garlits in the final.
The thing to keep in mind is all three of them drove. All three of them were very tough behind the wheel. Phil won Top Gas 1965 at Indy, the Bakersfield March Meet in 66, but 63 Indy is the one that comes to mind.
That was a shot heard around the world. Here was a team that had virtually unknown at the time, goes to the U.S. Nationals and knocks off the champion.
63, we had a problem going to Phoenix, and all of us got hurt.
We lost Don Maynard and Kenny, and Phil got busted up in the accident.
I wasn't able to make it back, so Kenny put Bobby Vodnik in the car, and like you just heard, he was able to win the Nationals for us.
We had just started using the Christmas tree, and Vodnik was on that tree. I mean, he had it figured out.
I was lucky enough to meet good people at the right time and have people help me out.
But I tell you, there's a strange turn of events about that. They almost didn't have to race me because this car, the Brief Encounter, was a car that they outran that I was driving. We had built this car for Cassidy and Windward. We took it to Indy and delivered it. I wasn't even entered in the race because they were gas and I was running my 1963 Swamp Rat 5 and it was on fuel and they hadn't changed to fuel yet. They'd run the Winter Nationals on fuel, but not the U.S. Nationals. And so I delivered the car to the Cassidy and Windward and they said, well, why don't you just make a run in it? Well, the first thing you know, I'm in the eliminations. And that win is what put the Harada, Hobbs, and Vodnik team into the Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
I think the two boys have said most of it. I got to keep reminding them, though, every time they talk about how good they are, I tell them I give you a hell of a good car to go with it. So, you know.
Our next inductee is K.S. Pittman.
You know, back in the day, if you were a drag strip operator, you were going to have a good show and you couldn't get a fuel dragster or a funny car, the next best thing was the gassers. They really put the crowd on their feet. And there was 4 cars that you had to have: John Masmanian, Stone Woods and Cook, George Montgomery, and K.S. Pittman.
Born in Mineral Wells, Texas in 1927, K.S., by the way, that's the name on his birth certificate. K.S. didn't stand for anything, and if you don't believe me, ask L.V., one of his 11 siblings.
K.S. Pittman was so popular, in fact, that he campaigned 2 cars, a 1933 and a 1941 Willys.
He pulled a pre-war compact 41 Willys Americar coupe out of a San Fernando wrecking yard in 1958, and again using John Edwards' engine, was making drag news headlines with 1169 and 119.20 times in B-gas. With fiberglass body parts, K.S. had perhaps unknowingly developed the prototype of the early 60s successful gasser.
And this is the actual 41 Willys that was found in somebody's garage and restored and donated to the museum. K.S. Pittman set the record in this car at Pomona in 1962, the A-gas record at a 10:55. An unbelievable ET. I can remember when dragsters didn't run that quick. And these little short wheelbase cars were a handful, and that's why the crowd loved them. K.S. is gone now. He's passed on to the other side, but he's going into the Hall of Fame tonight because he is truly one of the pioneers of drag racing.
I'm a little bit emotional. I have to say that I wasn't with KS when he was doing all the racing in the early days. There was 2 fellows that walked up, and I heard one guy say, "There's K.S. Pittman." And the other guy said, "And there's the K.S. Pittman car." I felt like I've died and gone to heaven, and I thought, who are they talking about? I soon learned, and I just think racing people are wonderful. They really are. And again, I thank everyone who elected K.S. to come into this. This is such an honor for me. I also want to thank the S&S group. They've really taken me into their hearts, and I love it. And I do love racing. And thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Our next inductee is Dick Rosberg.
He was probably the most versatile drag racer ever. He started in 1964 driving a top gas tractor at Lions Drag Strip by a fellow named Bruce Lampert. In 1970, he drove Mike Cool's top fuel dragster and also the Mr. Ed Willis nitro hydroplane boat.
But he really loved these jet funny cars, and he was very safety conscious. He didn't want anything to happen to the jet cars as far as being outlawed. In fact, he was so safety conscious that IHRA hired him to be the official jet inspector, and he put his entire life into them.
Dick had $1 million smile and a great sense of humor. I knew he was fighting cancer for a couple of years, and I thought he had it beat. So he stopped in one day, and he'd been to his doctor in Pinehurst, and he and Terry were together. And he said, "Steve, my doctor just told me I have a year to live." And I said, "Dick, that's awful. I'd hear that." I said, I don't even know what that means. And he said, with that $1 million smile, he said, "That means don't book me past October next year."
And this is such a special occasion. And I don't know whether to go where he passed it to a younger generation. Me, I'm considering myself at 43 to be the younger generation, that I do still drive a jet dragster from 2 different teams. Or the older competition with John. Yeah, he didn't win 15 championships, but my dad did drive top fuel hydroplanes, nitro funny cars, jet dragsters, jet funny cars, even drove a jet truck at one time.
Our next inductee is Louis Center.
Louis Center, that's one of the true pioneers of our sport.
Even from 12 years old when you were at Soapbox Derby, you did it at Gilmore Stadium, right? A wood plank track. They didn't roll it down the hill. But he was smart back then because he had the fastest pusher. His uncle pushed him around that track and he won. He got that trophy.
Gosh, I remember when I was 18 years old, there was a little book floating around called The Secrets of the Pros, and his name was in there, and he had a whole chapter on how to make flathead engines run.
This man exemplifies what motorsports is all about. You actually built one of the first true drag strips out in California, which was Saugus Drag Strip. You owned every different type of race vehicle there was.
Then he went on to form Anson Automotive, and they made lots of racing parts and some wonderful wheels.
I guarantee you, everybody in this room knows what Kreger rims are, right? He made those rims, centerline rims. You know, if you look back in those days, back in the 50s, all the drag racers and all the people in automotive, they ordered everything from Anson Automotive.
So he's been in the business from day one, and he's still with us, up in his 90s, but still up and about.
I don't know much I can say, but it's sure nice to see everybody here. I'm very proud to be here tonight. You're right. Thank you.
Coverage of the 23rd Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame 2013 Induction Ceremony is being brought to you by VR12 Ultimate Cooling System Protection, Steel Rubber, quality automotive rubber parts and weather stripping, and by ARP, the world leader in fastener technology.
Our next inductee, Wally Booth.
At the top of the list of the most amazing things I've ever seen was Wally Booth become the first drag racer and the only drag racer to win in pro stock with an AMC vehicle. I'm talking about the American Motors Corporation that for decades was better known for its economy compacts rather than horsepower. But by the end of the 1960s, it became apparent to AMC that they needed to jump into motorsports, and they wisely chose Wally Booth to head their pro stock program. Now, Wally had already made quite a name for himself with his more conventional Chevrolet Camaros. He was the super stock runner-up at Indy in 1968, and during the first 2 years of pro stock, 1970 and 71, he was just inches behind Bill Jenkins as the nation's second fastest Chevy, and he was miles ahead over whoever was third place at the time. So Wally could have easily spent the rest of his career by playing out the old Davis slogan, "We're number two, so we try harder." But Wally's competitive nature would not let him turn down the challenge of converting an economy motor into a racing engine. So he began competing with his AMC Gremlin X in 1972 and qualified for all 6 races that he attended that year. But even after switching to the sleeker Hornet body in 1973, Wally realized that still more work needed to be done in order to become truly competitive. So Wally's plan was to send his AMC teammates to California for the entire winter, where they would test new parts on an almost daily basis. The results were immediate. Wally qualified at career best number 5 at the 1974 Winter Nationals, and then 1 month later made drag racing history by recording the first AMC Pro Stock victory at the Gator Nationals, and then went on to enjoy his greatest season in 1976 with 4 victories that included a huge victory at Indy and a landmark triumph at the NHRA Finals, where he defeated Maskin and Canders in drag racing's first and only all AMC Pro Stock final.
And because I lived through those Pro Stock days, you know how pissed off Jenkins was when he got beat by a Nash? You think he was grumpy before that. You didn't see nothing until that happened.
I know all people, there's great Chevrolet fans, there's great Mopar fans, and Ford fans. But these AMC fans, there are not many of them, but boy, they are mighty.
Our next inductee is Dave Bortman.
I get the very big privilege of introducing a gentleman tonight that, you know, is right up there with the Manzos and the Biondos and the Fletchers of current day time sportsman racers. And I was also fortunate enough to be a kid running around the races following my dad around that got to race against him. And, you know, they shared some stories out in the hall, and I think Dave had to remind him at Bristol how he beat him. And this gentleman is one of the most successful sportsman races ever. Please help me and welcome Dave Bortman.
You did good about me and your dad. I thought you were going to say how many times he beat me, but I don't remember him ever beating me once. But he was a great competitor, though, so I'll tell you that. But anyway, in 1968, I went out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was just banging them away like, you know, just don't worry about it, just doing my thing. And I got in the final and didn't pay no attention. It was just another final. And I got down the end of the track, I turned around, and I started coming down the return road, and I says, damn, I says, I just won. I says, I'm a world champion. I just won. I'm just getting all excited and everything. And I come down in the pits. The first one to beat me is Bob Daniels. And he come running up to my car. He says, Dave, he beat me on the back. Nice job. And I says, yeah, I says, I don't believe it. I says, here I am, Joe Nobody from Nowhere, USA, and I just won the world finals. He says, well, you're somebody now.
The Founders Award goes to Dr. Robert Post.
Now, there's a name that's probably not very familiar to a lot of you drag race fans. But in the drag racing world, Dr. Post is well known. You see, in 1949, he ran a flathead dragster at Santa Ana. Now, there's not many racers around that can claim that kind of fame. But Dr. Post went on to get his doctorate in American history, and he has written many books. And that's where he really played a nice part in drag racing. Because when he was given the charge of setting up Man in His Material World at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., he chose 2 drag cars for the exhibit. Swamp Rat 30 that I built in 1986, and Bruce Larson's World Championship funny car. And then Dr. Post put the icing on the cake when he wrote the Bible of drag racing, High Performance. This covers drag racing from the very beginning and takes it right up to the modern day fuelers. And I'll tell you, he left no stone unturned. He sat in this library for over 30 days in the sweltering heat. It wasn't air conditioned at that time, and did the research, going through thousands of national dragsters, drag news, Southeastern drag news, drag times from the East, all the publications, so that he got everybody covered. And that's why Dr. Post is getting the Founders Award.